Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. An absolute pleasure to be able to speak to you today. Maybe you could begin with a brief introduction to the big hits. What can people expect if they watch your film?
Je pense que les spectateurs peuvent avoir.
So the audiences are going to be taken on an emotional journey. It's funny, it's sad. There's a mixture of emotions, and at the same time, they're going to be taken on an adventure through the fact that it introduces you to the world of theatre, but also more importantly to the kind of prison and detention system.
And I believe it's actually based on a true story of something that happened in Sweden back in the 80s. So maybe you can talk a bit about how you came across that story and how you translated that into the film that we see on screen today.
Alors comment j'ai pris connaissance de cette histoire, c'est par mon producteur qui m'a donné le documentaire qui relate cette histoire en fait.
So the way that he found out about the story was his producer actually gave him the documentary, or put the documentary forward, which told him about the story, and then that's how it kind of came about.
Mm-hmm.
Oui, et il y avait une deuxième partie de la question.
Was there another part of the question?
Yeah, I mean, how you take the kind of true life story and how you've maybe kind of adapted that into the kind of fictional narrative that we see in your film.
Alors l'adaptation, je dirais que j'ai gardé.
So the crux of the story is the same, and he took it from the real life story. However, there are some elements that are slightly fictionalized. So, for example, the character of the metteur en scène, which is the playwright in it, is fictionalized, and the different characters in it, the prisoners, are also not totally exactly the same. So it was that in that sort of way.
And even, I imagine, kind of the setting of the prison might have been different in Sweden in the 80s and, to a French prison. So was that also something that had to kind of shift a bit in your depiction?
Oui, c'était très différent. C'est déjà différent dans la composition.
So yes, it was very different, and specifically when it came to the differences in the demographics of each country. So the differences in ethnicity, especially in France, and that's something that he was very keen on bringing to each of his different characters, is studying the demographic and the ethnicity of the French population and bringing that to each individual character.
Can you tell us about your wonderful cast, in particular Cadmerad as Etienne at the center of it, but also each of these other characters, because they're kind of a motley crew, let's say, but they have a wonderful kind of charm in the way that they get to know each other. They each come out of their shells and each go on a journey, including the theatre teacher, the actor himself, even though he's supposedly helping these prisoners. It's a two-way street.
Effectivement, les personnages ont tous une.
So it was important for him to bring a singularity to each of the characters in the film. Whilst they were all, very singular and very unique, it was also important that they merged very well together, like you would actually in a theatre troupe. But the character of Cadmerad, Etienne, it was important for him to be, so he's very singular in the way that it was a man that's struggling with his job. He's suffering a lot in the position and not accomplish a lot and feel like he's feeling accomplished in his job, and yeah, right.
Oui,
and that's also one of the biggest differences in between the real story with Gerd Johnson, in that he didn't have this, so he didn't really suffer in his job or in his position. So that's one of the biggest kind of differences in between the true story and the fictionalized version.
Après, j'ai essayé effectivement d'individualiser les détenus.
So one of the biggest challenges that he faced was to create a singularity within all of the characters. So for example, one of them is in there for having robbed a bank. The other one is, doesn't stay true to the truth, is a compulsive liar, etc. So it's to give these people these singularities, but at the same time, when you work in a prison, you're not actually allowed to know what they've done. So it's kind of letting the singularity come through and making them individual, but without really giving it away.
Donc ça passe uniquement.
Which is when the kind of complexity came in, because you find out through little conversations and little parts come out and make you understand these characters more, but it's not on the nose. So yeah.
What about the depiction of, filming inside the prison? I guess both from a practical sense, but also showing the reality of life for people who are in prison. Not all, there's a diversity in the reaction of the guards, for example. Some are very supportive of their project. Some are obviously offering resistance to Etienne. So how did you want to portray what it can be like, even if you're wanting to build projects like this?
En fait, le tournage dans la prison.
There was actually a great collaboration between the prison and the prisoners, and the filmmaking. The administration part of it went really smoothly, and it was a really collaborative, great project. And what was also interesting is that kind of on the other side of that, with the finished project, when guards and prisoners watched the film, there was a great reception. They said it was actually a very realistic representation of what it's like to be a prisoner and a guard in prison.
Et je connais bien.
And also, he knows the world quite well, because before filming this film, he himself kind of adopted the role or shadowed the role of Cadmerade in the film by following a troupe in a prison, exactly like in the film. So he kind of got a glimpse of what it was like before even starting the film.
And there's kind of a sense of elation, I guess, alongside the characters. The audience also, once they're outside of the confines of the prison and they're on the stage and in their costumes, and there's that variety of life that obviously they can have a glimpse of again. So I wonder, was that also as a filmmaker kind of a joy to be able to break out and put the performances on stage? Was that something that was quite fun to film?
Oui, évidemment, parce que.
So yeah, it resonated a lot for me, because originally he is a comedian and has performed a lot on stages, so it's something that he holds very close to his heart. And also in the kind of context of a prison, this is something that he's seen himself, and having followed the troupe. So it was something that was held very close to the heart.
C'est vrai que j'ai pris beaucoup de plaisir.
And I took a lot of pleasure from it, and my actors, or the actors in the film, took a lot of pleasure from it. And there was an aspect which was quite complicated, which is being professional comedians and pretending and acting like you are an amateur comedian, with what a level of complexity to it.
And then I guess just to, I've taken up too much time, but it made me think perhaps of other kind of like underdog comedy films that also have perhaps underlying kind of social issues that are being raised. The Full Monty, for example, the sorts of classic British films of that ilk, and I'm sure similar in France. So in that sense, did you take kind of inspiration from this sort of genre of film? And what do you hope the takeaways are? Because other than making us laugh, it also makes us reflect on the reality of life for people who are prisoners, and the difficulty to be seen in another way once you have a criminal past. I think they're saying that, once they perform on the stage, but they still, aren't even allowed to buy cigarettes, in order to have that respect from society is something very difficult, or to reintegrate is very difficult.
Bien compris, c'est vrai que pour moi.
Very much in that case, yeah, one of my biggest inspirations was this kind of social comedy, very typically British, including the Full Monty, which was a huge inspiration for me, basically on those lines.
Oui, c'est vrai que c'est la comédie inspirée.
Being at the same time funny, sad, alive, it's the kind of thing that he was trying to portray through his film.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. Can you quickly tell us what you might be working on next? Have you got another film that's in progress?
Savoir si j'ai un autre film.
Right.
Oui.
So yes, I do have another project coming up that will come out next spring. And it's kind of along the same lines, or in the same gist as my previous film. So it's going to be set in the north of France, amongst a quite popular demographic, and it's the idea that a leader of a brass, it's set in a brass band, and the leader of the brass band will kind of meet different people. So it's in the same gist.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with us. Can't wait for everyone else to see this incredible film. So enjoy your time here in London as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.